Good morning and welcome to the weekly Sunday worship at First Jefferson Unitarian Universalist Church of Fort Worth, Texas. My name is Thomas Earthman and I serve the congregation as Lifespan Religious Educator. All of our services have been virtual. We've recorded most of them in our own sanctuary since March when the pandemic really started hitting our area, Tarrant County, and we will continue to do so until such a time as we think that it is safe to bring everyone back together. Thank you so much for joining us for this, our first fully virtual Sunday service, not including the pageant in December. Because we are fully virtual, we get to do interesting things. And this week, that means bringing in a guest speaker from out of town who normally might have been a little more difficult to get to speak to us. So I'm very excited to introduce him. But a couple of quick announcements first. The Name Change Committee has been reformed. And the Name Change Committee would like to hear from the congregation, from our members, and our broader community. They sent out a survey in a link in an email last week. If you did not get this email, if you have lost the email, if you need the link, or if you have any questions or concerns, they can be reached at namechange, one word all squished together, namechange@firstjefferson.org. On behalf of your Adult Religious Exploration Committee, I would like to invite you to our next round of programming. We're switching from Wonderful Wednesdays to Terrific Tuesdays, starting on February the 9th. We will be exploring past Ware lectures. The Ware lecture is given each year at the General Assembly over the summer, and we are going to be exploring them book club style. So you will watch, listen, read the Ware lecture beforehand, and then come prepared to discuss what you've learned, what you think we've done well since the Ware lecture was given, what you think we might need to work on, any other thoughts you have. We will be beginning with the 1966 lecture given by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., entitled Don't Sleep Through the Revolution. It's available to read on the UUA's website. I hope that you will join me on Tuesday, February the 9th. And as I said, we have a special treat. This week's speaker is coming to us from the greater Austin area. The Reverend Chuck Freeman has been in ministry since 1977, serving Church of Christ and now Unitarian Universalist congregations. He is the founding minister of Free Souls Church in Round Rock, Texas. Chuck is a founding member of the Texas Unitarian Universalist Justice Ministry and serves as its executive director. He is the co-founder and co-organizer of Undoing Racism Round Rock, working for systematic racial equity in the community. Working with progressive allies, Reverend Freeman played a key role in helping to elect the first Black woman to the Round Rock City Council and the first Black woman to the Round Rock School Board. So, without further ado, I am so thrilled to introduce to you the Reverend Chuck Freeman.
So buenos dias, First Jefferson. It's great to be with you, even if it's virtually. And I can't wait for the time when we can be together in person and have dinner together and look each other in the eye and hug each other's necks. I do bring greetings to Reverend Annie and Mary Kerwin and other great people there that we work with in our justice ministry. This call to worship is from the poet Rumi. It's called The Guest House. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. We enter into our time of worship together in this spirit. We're going to do a little call and response today on our chalice lighting. So right there in the comforts of your kitchen or your den or your living room or wherever you're sitting, right there in your house coat and slippers with your coffee or your tea, then I am going to, about halfway through and at the end, give you this, and the response will be, so we light this chalice. And you'll know you're doing it right if your dogs bay and your cats run for cover. We gather this morning on the border of dictatorship or democracy, on the border of climate change denial or sustainable survival, on the border of demagoguery or decency, on the border of elitist power or we the people power. So we light this chalice. We gather this morning on the border of despair or hope, on the border of colonialism or pluralism, on the border of trusting medical science or wishful thinking, on the border of life or death. As one voice, we pledge to follow the path of light and liberation. So we light this chalice. This is a story for all ages. So back in the late 90s, I was doing a lot of reading in shamanism and a lot of experiential workshops in shamanism. Shamans in the native traditions and the indigenous cultures, they are the holy people. They're the ones who have seen sacred visions. They're the one who can bring healing not only to individuals, but to the community as a whole. And in this waking vision that I had, I was up in Colorado doing like a week-long shamanic visioning workshop. I was in the area of Rapid City, South Dakota, where my family lived for twice actually over the years. And as you likely know well, that Mount Rushmore is outside of Rapid City. There's also a beautiful national park called Bear Butte National Park, which we went to often. Now, in the waking vision, I was kind of wading in the shallow water there at Bear Butte, and these bears appeared to me, and they simply and clearly said, Mount Rushmore will fall. Now, you see, Mount Rushmore was built on the most sacred mountain of the Lakota people. So to put it nicely, it was a gigantic middle finger to the Lakota people, to the native people, to the indigenous people, saying, we're in charge now. We're in charge. We're going to carve the faces of several of our presidents onto your most sacred mountain. Now, I thought about this over the years. What does that mean, Mount Rushmore will fall? Whether it literally falls or not, I don't know. What I've come to be aware and believe that what those bears were saying to me is that this age of European white male dominance and colonialization will come to an end. Its day is near of being over. And I think we're seeing that in the earlier, maybe even in the middle stages now, of what's going on in our nation. And I wanted to get a piece of jewelry to make this sacred. And so it took me about 5 years up in Minneapolis at a conference, and I wandered into a world market while I was on a break. And this is what I found. And that is a bear claw ring. And I get a lot of compliments and comments about it. It's a reminder to me that as long as I have breath, a major part of my sacred work is to let go of my white male privilege. And I believe this is our invitation too as a faith, to let go, to move aside, to have power sharing with all people, people of color, people of every origin and nationality who have come to this country seeking for a true democracy, to truly live that American creed that all are created equal. And that is our faith journey, and I believe one of the major missions of our faith going forward. Because we are all sacred creations of the great Spirit, of the Almighty, of the Creator. Amen. So this is the meditation and the prayer. There was something formless and perfect before the universe was born. It is serene, empty, solitary, unchanging, infinite, eternally present. It is the mother of the universe. For lack of a better name, I call it the Tao. It flows through all things, inside and outside, and returns to the origin of all things. Tao Te Ching, chapter 25. So let us join now in a moment of prayerful, contemplative, and meditative silence, opening our heart to the Spirit, opening our lives to the movement of the Tao, of the isness of all that is, in our place in it. Let us pause. Since my house burned down, I now own a better view of the rising moon. This haiku from the Japanese poet Machete, performed by Ken Fight, who called himself an itinerant fool, a holy fool, and don't we need more itinerant and holy fools in the world today? Now, this COVID-19 pandemic is not only ravaging the globe with death, but it is revealing the charred rubble of our failed systems. Early on now, about a year back in the EU, the countries impacted the most were because of austerity measures put into place after the 2008 financial collapse caused by Wall Street and banking fraud, which of course, none of the principals were held to account for. Maybe a couple of underlings, but nobody of note. And of course, we know now all across the EU, there are new lockdowns being enacted. In the United States, the response was denial, politics, and ambition over science. And we're finding out painfully that a virus is not susceptible to propaganda. It's not susceptible to lies. You may deny its impact, but it may cost you your life and the lives of many unsuspecting people. We have a climate now politically where people are mocked and bullied and threatened for wearing masks. Our former, thank God, former president was the super spreader in chief. In the United States, we have 4% of the world's population and about 25% of the world's infections. 433,000 deaths and counting of innocent lives, many of which could have been spared. This pandemic has revealed the charred rubble of our broken healthcare system. We've had states competing with each other, with the federal government, with other nations for the proper protective equipment, medical equipment, and now there's the jockeying for the vaccine. Now the new administration is trying to solidify this federally, but it's going to take some time. Studies have shown that African American and Latinx people are nearly 3 times more likely to be infected and twice as likely to die as their white neighbors. Now, the epicenter has basically moved all over the nation. Early on, it was New York and New Jersey. Then it went to the Navajo Nation. You probably didn't know that for about 6 weeks. The Navajo Nation was the epicenter. Then it moved to the south, into the southwest. And now essentially we have every state is seeing increases in COVID-19. On January 28th, almost 3,900 people died in our nation. Now, none of this that I'm saying is new. Our political and economic system was engineered to do exactly what it's doing. It's accomplishing and achieving exactly what it was designed to do. And that is to serve white male elites. You look at the Paycheck Protection Program. Now, our justice ministry, we decided to apply for this the first time around through our credit union. And by the time the credit union in 4 or 5 days got the application up, well, the money was gone. Because the multinational mega banks were already giving the money to their preferred customers. So you had Ruth Chris Steakhouse getting $20 million. The Los Angeles Lakers getting $4.6 million. Joel Osteen's megachurch in Houston, $4.4 million. Did any of these people really need the money? And several of them, except for Osteen, returned the money when they were outed. But I can assure you, had they not been outed by the media, that money would not have, they wouldn't have given the money back, and it would not have gone to the rank and file employees, the people that really needed it. Now, after our initial lockdown, our lieutenant governor suggested senior Texans should be willing to sacrifice their lives to open up the economy. And indeed, that's exactly what's happened. And not only senior Texans have sacrificed their lives. Our governor was recorded in private admitting that he knew that reopening would spread the virus and cost lives, and we continue to see his reckless decision coming true now in spades. Your county, Tarrant County, is third in the number of cases of the 254 counties in Texas. Our state now has 2.3 million cases, number 2 in the nation in this grim statistic, and almost 36,500 deaths. And now, in the midst of a 100-year physical pandemic, we are devastated anew by the racism pandemic, a spiritual cancer which is almost 600 years old. Are you aware that the transatlantic slave trade began in Portugal in 1444? And I would commend to you reading the excellent book, now it's gigantic, called Stamped from the Beginning by Ibram X. Kendi. But it is a definitive history of the ideology of racism. And now our nation has been traumatized anew in the last year by the police murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Rayshard Brooks, along with the Klan-style murder of Ahmaud Arbery. That's just to name, unfortunately, tragically, a scant few. In protest, resisting European colonization and police oppression has occurred in over 60 countries and in every continent. Buildings are literally being burned and statues are coming down, some from activists and some through legal means. Now, will we claim the insurance and rebuild with the same design flaws, or is there another path?
Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound.
Set our hearts and our spirits on the higher ground. Since my house burned down, I now own a better view of the rising moon. Now, at the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, Naomi Klein on The Intercept did a video called Coronavirus Capitalism. Now, I want to say that this was done way before the horrible disease of racism reared its head so graphically and publicly once again, although obviously it's always there. But what she said in that is that only a crisis produces real change. And that this pandemic, and I'll add on the pandemic of racism, which, by the way, unfortunately, there's not a vaccine for. And after this coronavirus thing is in our rearview mirror in a year or so, while the racism pandemic will still be working on, unfortunately, for the rest of our lives and likely for generations to come. But she said that this pandemic, in this case, these pandemics can catalyze an evolutionary leap similar to the one in the 1930s in America. Now, this new administration, newly elected, inaugurated, is short-term relief with the COVID and with the racism pandemics. So we can breathe a little bit, a little sigh of relief, but let us not get comfortable. Let us not be fooled. The ugly reality is that 74 million of our fellow Americans voted for cruelty, white supremacy, and dictatorship. 138 House members voted for an electoral coup after the US Capitol was breached in a violent attempted coup on January 6th as the Senate and House chambers were evacuated and occupied. And 5 people are dead. But we can. Those of us who have good heart, good faith, and good intentions, we can work toward a Green New Deal. Health care for all as a human right. Equitable taxation and compensation. Election reform. College education at no charge to students, avoiding crippling debt. I mean, how ludicrous is it that the best and the brightest will spend their life energy getting a master's or a PhD to express their calling in the world and go into debt, $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, and spend half of their working life just crawling out of debt. What kind of a nation is that? What kind of values does that portray? And of course, we can undo racism in all our systems, beginning with and including the church. Now, in our Texas U Justice Ministry, of which you are a part, 36 of our congregations across the state working together for justice. We're working on the systemic level. During this past election, we worked with the National UU The Vote in a Texas collaborative. We hired an organizer, and we touched over 42,000 people in the undervoting populations. We do believe that made a big difference. And of course, we know that Texas had record turnouts. And eventually that record turnout is going to make a difference in the right direction. The IRS allows us to use our 501c4, which we have, what we call our values voting recommendations. 13 of the candidates that we recommended to you are now holding office in Austin. In Nuevo Laredo, just across the border, we have been helping through the UUSC to provide funding for migrants stuck there by this cruel and depraved remain in Mexico policy, which I believe now has been revoked or is being revoked. We're actually going to have people who are able to apply for asylum, which is an international right. And now we are partnering with the Carrizo Camacrudo tribe, some of the oldest people in Texas going back into the 1500s before the Spanish came and colonized them. We just finished a 6-session series of conversations called People of the Land, Healing from the White Supremacy and Colonialization Pandemic. Our next phase now is to work into organizing, trying to stop this wall from being built through their sacred lands and natural gas pipelines. There'll be a lot of hearings with regulatory agencies, both federal and state, in which we can help value add voices opposing those things happening. And of course, we're organizing now for the new Texas legislature, which happened about 2 weeks ago on the 12th, January. 25 of our congregations voted on 5 priorities: racial justice, environmental justice, healthcare access, economic and voting justice. And so we're going to be inviting you to be a part of these efforts. I love in the haiku that he says, we now own a better view of the rising moon. We own it and we claim it. It's just not a fancy, passing, sentimental thing of, oh, look, honey, isn't that a beautiful moon tonight? And you forget all about it. We own it and we claim it. Now, we could obsess over the obsolete ashes, or we can transform our structures with rising moon consciousness. And I'm very aware that this is feminine imagery and feminine energy. And don't we desperately need that now on this blessed Mother Earth, more than ever? If we're going to save ourselves as a species, because the Earth will be fine, it's going to survive very well without us. It's done it for millions of years before. and it will do it after we're gone. But feminine energy says this is a sacred place. Goddess energy says this earth is holy. We're not looking for some imaginary existence somewhere after we die. It may exist, we do not know. But we do know that we're here now. Everything is holy now, as Peter Mayer wrote. So yous and people of good heart, good faith, and goodwill, we can and we will lead the way. You look at what happened in this last election in Arizona and in Georgia, and this just wasn't a flash in the pan. This is the result of a decade or more of grassroots organizing. And Texas is on this path if we keep doing our work. And we will. The future will be determined by those who are focused, centered, organized, and mobilized for the values that they hold dear. And that will be us and those like us. So as we own and act on rising moon consciousness, the politically impossible will become the politically inevitable. Amen. We're going to extinguish our chalice this morning with some of the words from our young poet, Amanda Gorman, from the inauguration. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation and every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge, battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there's always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. And here is our benediction. So as we go our ways today, our separate ways, our individual ways, I want to plead with you, and I'm not much into pleading, but I will plead with you to be true to your spiritual DNA as Unitarian Universalist. We're not people who sit in our comfortable padded pews when we had them, or in this case, our comfortable lazy boys and couches in our homes, and just become cynical and go into despair and talk about how terrible it is and how horrible it is. We're not people who act like we're victims, but we are people who get out. We're people who transform society, who change culture. Yes, imperfect, but yes, always evolving and always looking to become that true Unitarian Universalist faith, that all people in all places at all times recognize the beautiful universal values of faith and goodness and decency. So I don't know how long it will take, but here's what I do believe: that together we will bend Texas and America towards justice. Go in peace. Amen.